Today we are deconstructing Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's performance that feels much more like a cry for attention than any sort of contribution to science or the subject matter. But more importantly, we're looking at why Catherine, Princess of Wales, is succeeding where they are failing, by choosing strategy over fear-mongering. So let's get into why this recent appearance was a total mask-off moment for the Sussexes.
With you on how the digital space is deeply affecting our collective and mental, emotional, and physical health.
Hi everybody, I'm Beebs Kelly. Welcome back to another video. Before we jump in, I'd like to invite you to subscribe, click the like button, the hype button, and share this video, but only if you would like to. So Prince Harry and Meghan Markle popped up on a chat on Oprah's platform to do a really brief discussion with Jonathan Haidt and Catherine Price about their new book, The Amazing Generation, about raising kids with less screens in a very phone-based world. And this is sort of the accompaniment to his first book, The Anxious Generation. And it's a perfectly good concept for a book, and an important book to have released, but it has been stained by the involvement from the Sussexes, where they only highlighted the chasm between their contributions versus that of the real royals. First, let's take a closer look at the video itself, because this filter is wild, isn't it? It is out of control. I really can't imagine why you would want to use such a heavy filter on your video, especially in this context with the Sussexes. I mean, on one hand, I understand that for Meghan, this probably seemed very harsh. Just a normal camera like I use or you use, or a webcam on a laptop. It's definitely not the same ball game or the same appearance or outcome that you'll get, the same polished look that you'll get when you have heavy airbrushing and editing and perfect studio lighting that the Meg had when she has done photo shoots, for example, or on With Love Meghan. But even though a regular old camera lens without any filters, like this one, can seem a little harsh, at the same time, it was pretty over the top and distracting. Meghan always seems to use really heavy filters. In all of her Instagram stuff, there's always a lot of filters going on. It's like she gets a little carried away with the editing section. With Love Meghan also had a really heavy, sort of hazy, warm filter over it that kind of made it unnecessarily overly stylized. It definitely made the finished product look less polished, whereas I think she was going for making it look more polished. It looked less polished to me. It looked a little bit more amateur. You know the way when you first start exploring a camera app or perhaps on social media or something, there's so many different filters and effects, and it can be really fun to look through and stuff, but the original picture, just with very small retouching to really just enhance the original, tends to look a lot better and more professional than laying on a ton of filters. And when you use filters to this degree that Harry and Meghan did here, you're approaching cartoonish. It ends up taking away from your presence, because we all know that you have to go in and select those settings. You have to purposefully go in and be like, yes, I want a filter and I want to turn it all the way up to where I look like a cartoon almost. And so it's really impossible to ignore this fact that they were compelled to put this filter on. Like, why? Are they that insecure or worried about their appearance that they can't just have no filter or a minimal filter? It seems a little shallow, especially when they're talking about online stuff and mental health stuff. You'd think that they wouldn't be that worried about using a filter and just pop on and just be normal. But no, it comes off as unprofessional, cheap, and shallow to have this heavy of a filter. It's bizarre. And it's bad for the Sussexes, especially in particular, because they are still clinging on to this foolish idea that they can produce content through Archewell Productions. At this time, the only two things left on their slate really is the shared rights with Netflix for 2 books to turn into films, which they have not initiated the projects at this time. But you'd think that they would at least want to demonstrate a more professional capacity in video format than this that looks like a teenager who got filter happy. Harry's biggest soundbite from this little discussion was, quote, "Over the years, we've worked with how the digital spaces are deeply affecting our collective and mental, emotional, and physical health." I'm not sure I would categorize it that way. Have Harry and Meghan worked with how digital spaces are affecting anything? I don't think they have. They really haven't done that much work at all from my point of view. The biggest thing that they accomplished over 5 entire years was the Parents Network, which they gave up on less than a year later after almost nothing was done with it. So I'm really not sure that I would phrase it that way. It seems very disingenuous to say that Harry and Meghan, for them to claim that they have worked with how these digital spaces are affecting people. I don't think they're doing any direct work in this arena at all. Instead, he could have just said that he's paying attention or learning about or talking about, so much talking about the doom and gloom of it all. That would have been much more accurate. But I want to play this very short clip for you really quickly because I think that Harry is reading notes and that he skipped a part and Meghan jumped in. So take a look and let me know what you think.
And the outcome of your research, which has created a parent-led movement, which is astonishing and much needed.
And that we're proud to be a part of.
Yeah, hugely.
Yeah.
And your insights have been incredibly valuable over the years for our work with parents.
So if you watch Harry's eyes, it looks like he's reading just below where the camera lens is. And then Meghan jumps in this moment to say that we are proud to be a part of this movement. And I think it's because she wrote this nonsense for them. And it's just kind of embarrassing, cringe, ick. It makes Meghan seem controlling as well, that she had to jump in to be like, we're proud to be a part of this movement. Like, just let Harry finish his thoughts. I don't know. The interrupting is not polite no matter what. Even if it was an important point to make, there's no reason why she couldn't have just waited. I don't think that came off very well, and it kind of, to me at least, gave away that Harry was reading something she had written. And again, I don't really see Harry and Meghan as part of this movement. They have elbowed their way in to be center stage and with their words only want to be hailed as leading the charge or champions of this cause or front and center to this cause. But in reality, it's the authors, the researchers, they are the ones who are doing the work all the time and who are actually part of this movement and advocating on a daily basis. The Meghan Herald just prance in and hijack the microphone every now and again. And the worst part of their insistence on inserting themselves into this subject is that it may actually deter people from reading this book, which has great content. Jonathan Haidt has been studying this subject for decades, so it would be a shame if the Sussexes ended up limiting interest in the book, because that's a very real possibility. Harry and Meghan are very much disliked by the public, and their involvement with things has at times been sort of shady, felt very manipulative, or like they're only putting in 10% effort and want to get 100% credit. And that's well documented at this point. And all of their, publicity is mostly negative. So for them to be joining in on something like this, it has the risk of actually hurting or limiting the scope and the reach of this project or a certain cause or a book in this case. Because of the Sussexes' involvement, making people be like, oh, I don't want to support that if the Sussexes are involved, or I don't want to support that if Meghan and Harry are involved with it or supporting it. People get really anti. Meghan's biggest soundbite is, quote, what I love is that the more we encourage our children to do this, meaning disconnect from screens and do more real-world screen-free stuff, we mimic those same behaviors. We also start to play and we also start to be more present. This sounds like Meghan is telling you to tell your kids to not be on screens as much, and then eventually you will follow suit and do the same, when actually it should be the other way around. We have to model the behavior that we want to see in our children first, and then they will naturally follow. And when we do have to encourage them or remind them, we have an established pattern on our side that our actions are backing up what we're saying and guiding our children to do. So this self-proclaimed parenting authority, Meghan, actually has it backwards. Some of the publicity of this brief appearance mentioned the Lost Screen Memorial. People magazine had like a huge 2-paragraph section of the article about the Lost Screen Memorial, and I saw other outlets follow suit and also include a note about the Lost Screen Memorial. My suspicion is that the PR for this appearance that was sent out to various publications and news outlets included a blurb about that this Conversation with Jonathan Haidt is continuing on their work with Parents Network, neglecting to mention the fact that they gave it away half the time. And the Lost Screen Memorial also is in line with this work. That is my suspicion, that that's why so many articles mentioned it. But I wanted to use this opportunity to clarify the Lost Screen Memorial Project that Archewell Foundation at the time, now Philanthropies, I guess, has done, because the context really, really matters here. Harry and Meghan, via Archewell, set up this display of 50 phone screens with kids' faces who were lost somehow connected to social media. That could have been that they acquired like illegal substances through social media, or that they were bullied and decided, that was too much to bear, those sorts of things. But regardless, it was 50 children's faces across 50 different phone screens whose families attributed the loss to the phone one way or the other. Not really like super direct or clear or anything like that, just kind of like the phone was involved. This is often mentioned as just the Lost Screen Memorial, like it's some big deal that still exists, okay? This was a 24-hour installation in New York City, so nothing could be further from the truth than the impression that these news articles are giving people that this is some established memorial that is ever present. It is not. It is gone. It was gone 24 hours after it popped up. And this happened in April of last year of 2025. The fact that it was only up for 24 hours, I think, makes these statements that this Lost Screen Memorial is continuing on this work is extraordinarily misleading. To talk about it as if it's some permanent thing or like it went on all month of April. No, it was up for 24 hours. That's likely all that they could afford or that they were willing to pay, but that's not the point. 24 hours? How big of an impact can that really have? Its reach was extraordinarily limited. It's not even really worth mentioning. Next, Meghan seemed to have lost her way to her point. I'm a bit confused exactly where she was going with this particular statement, but she was criticizing social media companies for calling people who use social media users, because users is usually associated with drug addictions. Okay? Well, first off, it's been called a username since the dawn of the interwebs, I'm pretty sure. And so oftentimes on social media spaces and from the tech side of things, from the programming side of things, you talk about the person who's using the program as the user. If you are building an app, you're talking about the user interface and whatnot. With software, you're talking about the user's experience, the user interface. So when we're talking about social media, that is still within the tech industry. So of course they're going to use language like the user of the program. That makes perfect sense to me and my understanding of computer science. But also, social media is addictive. And isn't she supposed to be against social media? So wouldn't having a layer of stigma around being a frequent social media user make sense and be like, well, yes, because it is very addictive and you are using this program, then user makes sense. Even if it does develop a negative connotation, wouldn't that be kind of the same direction as criticizing social media and talking about it like it's a problem? So it kind of feels like she's confused about what her point is here, or she doesn't really fully understand like programming vocabulary or, software vocabulary, because it is a very standard term across all programs, all software, video games, everything talks about the user, the person who's going to be using the program, because the consumer could have been grandma who bought it for you and gave it to you. So the consumer is the person who buys it, but the user is the person actually utilizing the software or the program or the app or what have you. Anyway, anytime Harry and Meghan bring up social media stuff or try to start talking about social media stuff, I always have to point this out, and I will keep saying it as long as Meg is on Instagram or any social media platform, that she is actively making them money by being on the platform at all, and by posting on that platform, she is making Meta money. So she will never be respected or viewed as a champion of the anti-social media or pro-internet safety movement as long as she is still on social media. She is a user. So her attempt at a provocative point falls flat here because Meg is becoming a rather frequent user of Meta. Overall, Harry and Meghan's appearance here felt very shallow, and their involvement with this cause feels shallow as well. It only goes as deep as their few minutes of prep allow, which is not very much. I don't walk away from this feeling like Harry and Meghan are contributing or have a good understanding of the book or the subject matter at all. In fact, their Stanford research that they cited is actually just publicly available, broad scientific data and research, part of this movement on internet safety, and it's all publicly available to anyone who wants to see it. There's nothing special or specific to Archewell or the Sussexes via Stanford at all.
Their children to online harms.
Yes.
And working towards solutions to keep all children safe. Can you speak to how the phone-based childhood, as you call it, affects kids' emotional development and what families can do to support healthier patterns?
They didn't appear to have actually read the book or have a very good understanding of the book. It all felt very surface level and like they were just throwing around, Stanford research that we have reviewed and whatnot. We can all go and look up that research and see it for ourselves. There was nothing special there. That is what they relied on as their crutch to get through this discussion, and come to find out, it's publicly available research. So ultimately, their involvement with the cause in general, but with this book in particular, feels more like a distraction to me and like it took away from the book launch, which otherwise could have been more impactful if you would have gotten less controversial people to participate. And when I cruised through the comments, it was a lot of people commenting that they should have gotten more likable people involved, or that Harry and Meghan are a deterrent, just as I was worried about. As for my personal unsolicited opinion on screen-based childhoods, I'm not about it. I really do not like the idea of kids getting sucked into a phone before their brain is fully developed. I think it's a huge problem for sure. But there's also the difficulties of culture and society, on community levels, if everybody gets their kids' phones, in part because you want to keep track of them. You want to keep them safe. You can't be there to pick them up. What if they, need to call you for some reason, or you need to know where they are after school or things like that? There is a safety layer to phones as well, and it can be difficult to battle a teen, I'm sure. I'm not there yet in my parenting journey, but I'm sure it's very difficult to battle a teen over how much phone access they get or how many apps they're allowed to have or those sorts of things. It's a complex issue. And speaking as a parent who, like Harry and Meghan, hasn't gotten to that point in the parenting journey yet, that's part of why I feel like Harry and Meghan aren't delivering very much value, because it's not like they've been through this or that they're actively dealing with it. Not saying that they can't get involved with causes unless they have direct experience with it, but the way that they talk about these things and present themselves in these spaces is sort of embellished to what their actual level of understanding, experience, or knowledge really is. And another reason why it comes across poorly, Harry and Meghan's presence in this space or in this discussion, is because Harry and Meghan are always talking about the extremes of this subject. They go straight to, right out of the gate, when we first heard them start picking up this cause, they were immediately talking about children who were lost to this, concern. They went straight to the extreme, straight to the fear-mongering. Remember, the parents need to be first responders, Harry said. And that's exactly why their involvement feels like it's taking away from the cause more than contributing, because they do not ever speak to the nuance of these issues. There is so much more day-to-day, not extreme consequences, but still a concern that comes from lots of technology use or lots of phone use or social media engagement, rather than just those smaller percentages of the extremes. Of course, the extremes matter, but I'm just saying that Harry and Meghan seem to only look at the extremes and the extreme outcomes rather than understanding that this issue is so big that the nuance is where the solutions lie, not in the extremes. And I think that the way that Catherine, Princess of Wales, has approached this topic and discusses this subject is a lot smarter. It's a more strategic approach. She points out that screens are perpetuating disconnection, that even when families are together, they remain focused on screens at times and thus lack connection. The specific vocabulary she chooses just automatically illustrate the importance and value of face-to-face, one-on-one, real-world connection. And it didn't take any extreme examples or telling people what to do or making silly analogies or anything like that. It feels a lot more genuine because it can be applied to the nuance of the issue. Even just checking your phone for text messages when you're actively maybe helping your child with homework is a moment of distraction that takes away from that one-on-one time with your child. That's the message Catherine is sending. She's not nitpicking on, oh, it's just social media or just comments or just the extreme outcomes. It's just in general, the overall root of the problem is the level of distraction that it brings within a home. And I think that makes more sense. And I think it's received better by the public too, because it doesn't feel like she's telling people what to do. It's that she's reminding people or pointing out even the little distractions make a difference over time. With Harry and Meghan, because they talk so much about how unfair they felt people treated them or about how Meg was treated unfairly or the internet was unfair to Meghan. They've told us about that for 5 years and complained about that for 5 years. So their involvement in this cause oftentimes only feels like they're doing it because of that. Because Meghan had a negative experience, they're doing this. And that's why. And they bring that up every time they talk about the subject as well, which only reinforces the idea that they're only involved in it because they think it backs up their case that Meghan was treated unfairly by the internet. Whereas Catherine's message feels very rooted in her work with childhood development and from a place of offense, not defense. Her strategy and advocacy for less screen time and more interpersonal connection is definitely built on her long-term advocacy for early childhood development, and it's characterized by leading through example rather than direct instruction. Her October 2025 essay, The Power of Human Connection in a Distracted World, was co-authored with Harvard professor Robert Waldinger. It frames screen time not as a moral failing, but as a troubling role in a wider epidemic of disconnection. Meanwhile, the Sussexes take a more authoritarian approach that focuses on systemic reform and the extreme moral consequences of online platforms. They focus on catastrophic harm. They often speak alongside families who have lost children to online-related problems or issues. They use high-stakes language, asserting that the best parenting in the world cannot keep children safe from these platforms, which is a terrifying thing to say to anybody, and not helpful, and not very fair. Using extreme language like that always feels immature and ill-informed. Catherine also focuses more on presence than policy, trusting that people can make better choices that will slowly but surely make widespread improvements to this problem in the little moments. It's the little consistent things that matter in the long run, that build up over time and change the way we view things and change culture. It's never these huge whiplash situations. Instead of demanding bans, Catherine illustrates the fragmenting of focus. She highlights how checking a phone during dinner or play is a withdrawal from a basic form of love that children need for brain development. And her public appearances early this year, like visiting a hand-weaving charity in Scotland, emphasized tactile, community-focused engagement over digital presence. She didn't have to tell us, let's get off the screens and do something real or analog. She just did it and does it and shows with her examples. Her personal hobbies like outdoor photography or meditation are consistently presented as authentic and resilient alternatives to the digital world. And her current campaign of videos that have been coming out doubles down on this by launching projects that promote the power of creativity and nature as therapeutic tools, further grounding her message in positive real-world alternatives rather than just highlighting digital dangers all the time like Harry and Meghan, where it's like, oh my gosh, I should spike my cortisol and get all stressed out about this and be all worried and scared, instead of being able to see clear, calm examples of what better choices actually look like. Harry and Meghan have tried to position themselves as global reformers to little effect. Their work via the Archewell program tried to position them as central figures in lobbying for legislative change. But their statements, like supporting Australia's social media bans for under 16s, are just words. There's no action behind it. They frame social media companies as predatory drug dealers and the current digital environment as a crime scene, but again, that ignores the nuance of the reality. And Meghan constantly weaving in her most trolled person in the world, I was bullied, her own experience laced throughout, describing the online criticisms she faced during pregnancy as cruel and unsurvivable, or at other times as something that she had to work against or overcome, frames her survival as a source of authority on the topic, when we all know the reality of the situation is that she's speaking about it in an extremely overblown fashion. That is not realistic, what she is claiming, to what actually happened. To further complicate the Sussexes' approach, their credibility is undermined because they remain heavily engaged in media-driven lives while simultaneously decrying the platforms that fuel them. Their personal focus on bullying or social media feels like a way to deflect from legitimate public criticism rather than addressing the broader nuance of childhood development or rooting it in solutions. But leave your thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear what you thought about this appearance and about Harry and Meghan's contributions to this cause. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you have a happy day ahead, and I will see you next time. Bye!